Really trying to put some pressure on Forrest McCormack now, and it's going to be an absolute drag race down to the start-finish line as Forrest tries to squeeze. So lights are up, engines are revving, and away we go for race number 1 here. We've got Mats getting off the line pretty well here with Andrew Shaw and Akshik looking to make early gains here. Paul Maguire on the left-hand side of your screens in the green and yellow looks to try and make an early lead into the first corner here, but Mats gets away very cleanly, and that leaves the rest of the grid here. Andrew Shaw fighting with Paul Maguire in 2nd and 3rd place respectively, as Akshik loses that a little bit and drops down to 4th place. So through the twisty first sector here with the bumps, we've got Andrew Shaw starting to make a little bit of headway here, trying to break away from the group, but Mats is away to a stellar start here, and we'll have a comfortable 1.5 second gap already before anything's really got underway here. Looks like Akashik here is hanging on in 4th place with Paul Maguire in 3rd at the moment. Dave Nascardi, who I know is out for points today, is following closely behind Akashik. But so far so good, no major contact or issues between the leaders as they come round the opening lap of the race here. So it looks like a very twisty, quite narrow circuit here, and up until you get onto the wider section here, which I believe is part of the oval. And here the drivers will be able to stretch their legs and also use the width of the track to potentially try and make some overtakes work, but otherwise the circuit is quite difficult to make moves on, I believe. But Paul Maguire here is the one to watch. He's the driver in contention with Forrest McCormack for the overall championship. Looks like a small mistake from Andrew there makes it easy for Paul to slip down the right hand side, and that means that Andrew Shaw is now in 3rd place and Paul is through to a early P2. And on the way down the start-finish line here, you can see David Ascari is going to be in a pretty prime position here to set himself up for a potential overtake early on, but T1 is not the place to try and make that move work. You can see how complicated that corner is to navigate on your own, let alone when you've got a car in front of you. And David loses out there almost 7 tenths, which is going to cost him dearly in the chase for Akshik. Very pleased to see that. And up front we've got a little bit of contact potentially as Paul Maguire and Andrew Shaw go side by side. Paul not giving up just yet, but Andrew fighting back on the inside. Again, doing their best to avoid contact, but you can see how tight the course is here in sections. You really don't have much room to maneuver. As we come through another lap here, David Nascardi pulls out to the right hand side as Andrew Shaw also looks to try and make a way round. Looks like Paul Maguire and David Nascardi get themselves into a little bit of trouble there in T1. But Paul Maguire is still in 3rd place and hanging on here. It's Binding though, who's up to 4th place, setting himself up here for a potential podium again if he can just hang on. But Andrew has done well to get back through there to P2. Mats in the meantime would be very glad to see in the rear view mirror that there is no contention from P2 at the moment. 7 seconds plus behind. And Paul Maguire is going to be very close indeed as they shoot down the start-finish straight here. I don't think we're going to see the opportunity from Paul here to make a move. It's too difficult a corner to try and do this on T1. But look, there's Paul going around the outside. He's going to try and make this work. Doesn't quite manage to get that corner down perfectly and loses that a little bit there. You can see the bumpiness of the track now starting to impact the car. Definitely comes into play here, but there we go. There's Paul getting a very good exit from the corner here. Tries to go around the outside of Andrew Shaw once again. I think he's going to have to tuck in again. Yes, he does, but he's looking to try and find his way through. And he is not going to be giving up on this potential overtake of Andrew Shaw just yet. But you can see how narrow the track is. And there's Mats up ahead. Well and truly 10 seconds clear now of these two. And these two battling is not going to help their chances of catching up with Mats. Andrew getting a slightly better exit from the final corner there allows him to slip away a little bit from Paul's grasp. In the meantime, Kaiser is now running in 5th place with Akshik in 6th place, and Akshik doesn't seem to be getting any closer based on what my last observations were. But here's Paul Maguire with a potential overtake opportunity on Andrew Shaw. He's thought about it and decided against it as he rounds the final corner. He's going to be thinking about the exit for the final corner now. This is exactly where he wants to be, right behind Andrew Shaw. And there's contact between those two. Paul Maguire comes out better with Binding and Kaiser Greenie looking to have taken advantage of the situation, but Andrew Shaw unfortunately dropping down to 7th place as a result of that. We might see that come back to bite Paul Maguire if a ticket is submitted for that. But you can see the pressure between these drivers turning into an instant there. Meanwhile, Binding in a very commanding position here is still hanging on to P2. And Kaiser Greenie isn't necessarily getting particularly close, but in the background you can see Akshik now side by side with Paul Maguire as these two come round the right-hander right next to each other. And Paul is just eked in front of Akshik at the moment. There's a left-hander coming up next, so that puts Akshik back in on the forward foot, or the front foot, sorry. And Akshik will just be able to close the door now, I think, on Paul Maguire. But no, Paul is through again. And these two have gone side by side on such a narrow track now for so long that I can't quite believe my eyes. In the meanwhile, you can see Kaiser Greenie getting very close to Binding as they fight their way through. Akshik is through, and so is Kaiser Greenie. So Kaiser is now up to P2. He's got Binding right behind him. Binding's going to have to be very careful now. This is a very tricky corner to be this close behind Kaiser Greenie. Binding tries to go around the outside, and Kaiser, in true Kaiser style, applies caution over bravery there and decides to avoid an incident. But Binding is through now. There's 2 minutes left on the clock. In the meantime, though, we've got Paul Maguire and Akshik again, almost side by side for a moment there as these two battle just as much as they were before. Paul Maguire is up to 4th place though, and he's going to be trying to chase down Kaiser Greenie as these two go side by side again. Actually on the inside this time as they come through into the infield section. All the while, this is allowing David Niscardi to get ever closer as he's now closing the gap to sub 1.5 seconds. He's almost getting to within a second now of Akshik. And these guys are going to be very careful not to let David Niscardi get into the mix, because that's going to definitely spice things up a little bit here as we reach the conclusion of race number 1. Akshik going on the inside this time as Paul Maguire will now get to return the favour going into the right-hander. Hopefully there's no incident between these two. That would be very bad news for Paul. He got quite lucky in the last one. In 6th place, but has taken advantage of the battling up front to close the gap and is now part of a three-way battle with Paul Maguire and Akshik. I'm hoping that we don't see any contact between these three. But the leader is now on the final lap. And I think we are just about waiting for Mats to finish the race. Mats has won the race now, so it's going to be a really close finish now. Close finish between these three as they come down the start-finish line here. Binding is through first. He's going to podium. Kaiser Greenie catches 3rd place, and Paul Maguire takes 4th place with Akshik in 5th, David Niscardi in 6th place, and that leaves Andrew Shaw in 7th place with Red taking 8th place. Bradley there in 9th place, Neat in 10th. So that means they're all picking up points today. And that's great news for these guys. But Binding, another fantastic result. He did promise in his YouTube comment that he would be getting another podium, and here he is delivering on that promise once again. So lights are up, engines are revving, and away we go. Neat taking an early exit from the start-finish line there as Forrest McCormack's very late off the line for some reason. And looks like Thierry Red and a few other drivers have managed to get through early on, leaving Forrest McCormack very disadvantage there as he takes an early exit off the track and rejoins midway through, battling now with Bradley. He's actually as far back as Paul Maguire is in the circuit, which is not great news for him. Let's go to Red, who has managed to sneak away and take an early lead here, as Forrest McCormack is into 4th place, dropping down into 5th place now, as Akshik gets through to 4th place. Forrest McCormack is here side by side with Akshik, both driving the Patreon livery. But Forrest hasn't done too badly out of the start there. I mean, he did go from 1st down to 5th, but it could have been a lot worse. We have seen some races where these guys have had some early accidents early on, and that's caused a lot of upsets in terms of throwing them to the very wrong end of the grid. But there's 20 minutes left to go. Forrest is a very competent driver here in the Radical, and I don't know how much practice he's managed to do for this round, but he seems to be quite happily holding his own here against Akashik in front. But in the rearview mirror you can see Paul Maguire, who obviously has done a lot of practice here. He's now directly behind his main rival, Forrest McCormack. On board here with Paul Maguire as they round the final corner, and you can see Forrest McCormack just ahead, closing in on Akashik. But going down the start-finish straight here, you can see the overspeed from Paul Maguire here as he tries to make a move on the inside. Very tricky corner to do that here, but he and Forrest McCormack managed to get through there without too much of an issue. In the background you can see Bradley taking a little bit of a side track off into the grass there. So David Niscardi there seems to have just gone off track, and Andrews got taken out there a little bit by one of the drivers coming out onto the oval part of the oval part of the track here. And now we've got a bit of an interesting situation developing. We've got Akashik, David Niscardi, Forrest McCormack and Red all trying to get through T1 in one piece here, and Red taking a little bit of an evasive reaction there to allow Paul Maguire to get through unscathed. Forrest McCormack now sandwiched between 2 Patreon drivers as he battles his way through Akashik and Red. On board here with Forrest McCormack as he tries to fight his way through the crowd here. He's in 4th place at the moment. Paul Maguire up to 2nd place, which is good news for him. Forrest very late on the brakes here as he almost makes contact with the rear end of Akashik there. And this is really tight racing here at the Lausitzring. Forrest trying to find a way past Akashik. He's going to have to sit and wait though. In the background you can see Binding battling with Red as they go side by side. But Forrest McCormack thinking about a move on Akashik there, decides against it, pulls back in. Red gets through. And Forrest will have to try and just bide his time. What he wants to do is get a really good exit from the final corner and try and make a move on Akashik there, but he's going to really struggle to do that. But in the meantime, we've got Red side by side with Binding here. Kaiser Greenie also in the mix here, as Red on the inside here loses out of position to Binding. And now Kaiser Greenie and Matt in the rear view are edging closer to Red. Let's take a quick look at Red though. Red's got Matt right behind him as they go side by side now. Matt gets the inside line. Red gets a cutback though. And there's contact between the two of them as they try and exit the infield section. That's the risk that you run here at a circuit this close. And Forrest McCormack is literally breathing down Akashik's neck right now. He is not leaving much on the table here, as there's a bit of contact between Forrest McCormack and Akashik. That may be the kind of thing that results in a ticket later on. That puts Akashik down to 6th place, as Binding now up to 4th place, potentially setting himself up here from Binding's point of view for another podium. He now challenges Forrest McCormack on the left-hand side by side with Forrest. This might be damage that we're seeing on Forrest's point of view. But Forrest executes a nice little switchback there and is back up to 3rd place. Binding, on the other hand, is not going to be giving up just yet. He's awfully close indeed, and subject to getting a good exit from the final corner, he may yet be able to challenge Forrest McCormack on the run down the start-finish straight here. But it isn't over there just yet. Matt's now challenging behind Andrew Shaw as he runs down the start-finish line here. Andrew goes defensive. And again, you can see just how complicated this corner is from an overtaking perspective, as Andrew does a great job there of holding his line and prevents Mats from overtaking. And there's only a few seconds left on the clock now, so really coming down to this lap now. It's all about what happens in the next few seconds. Bit of a gap opening between these three drivers. It's about half a second between each of them. Not too much in it, but enough to mean that it could be a little bit too much. And there's Binding going slightly off track, which puts him at quite a significant disadvantage now. But here's Kaiser Greenie in the closing stages of this lap. The very last lap of the race, really trying to put some pressure on Forrest McCormack now, and it's going to be an absolute drag race down to the start-finish line as Forrest tries to squeeze Kaiser Greenie, but Kaiser, I think he's going to be through. There's not much he can do about it now, Forrest McCormack, and he drops down to 4th place with Kaiser Greenie stealing 3rd just at the last second there. And Kaiser will be very happy with that. He has not had too much luck with the podiums, and Forrest McCormack is now going to be slightly more disadvantaged than Paul Maguire, than he thought he would be compared to Paul Maguire. I'd be very interested to see how close it is in the points now between these two following the conclusion of race number 2, but very good to see that Forrest McCormack made it back here in time to catch race number 2.